Hello and welcome to Tax Matters. I'm Chiamaka Ohawuchi. We begin by welcoming on board all the members of the newly inaugurated Federal Executive Council, ministers and ministers of state, especially the minister in charge of our own space, Mr. Wale Edun, Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy. We look forward to an exciting time working with you. August is gradually coming to an end. After August is September. On Thursday, 6th July 2023, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu signed 4 executive orders, one of which was the order that extended the commencement date of the Finance Act 2023 to September 1st. You will recall that in the last days of President Muhammadu Buhari's government, President Buhari signed the Finance Act 2023 with the effective date of May 1st, 2023. The succeeding Tinubu government quite rightly decided to give the tax-paying public a breather by deciding to follow the extant regulations of giving 90 days notice for any tax legislation to take effect. So, what we are about on this episode is to remind you of the provisions in the Finance Act 2023 that amended sections of various tax laws. So, yes, an extension was given, but the long-awaited September 1st is here. A total of 11 tax laws were amended by the Finance Act 2023. Let's share a few of them with you. First is capital gains tax. Capital gains tax on disposal of digital assets has been set at 10%. That's talking about the likes of cryptocurrencies. Of course, that is without prejudice to companies' income tax and personal income tax due on such investments. With effect from 1st of September, if you make a loss on the disposal of an asset, the loss can be set off against gains made from the disposal of the same type of asset, and this can be carried over for the next 5 years. Next is companies' income tax. The major one on companies' income tax is the one on Section 14 that has to do with income accruing to non-resident entities engaged in shipping and air travel. The amendment now stipulates that before such companies can obtain tax clearance certificate in Nigeria, they are now required to submit revenue statements, which will be certified by a director of the company and the auditor of the company. Still under companies' income tax, rural investment allowance, which was given to companies or factories, if you like, set up in rural areas where such companies had to construct their own roads, provide electricity, water, has now been removed. Read our lips. Rural investment allowance has been removed. We'll move on to stamp duties, and essentially, the amendment to the Stamp Duties Act is in relation to the sharing formula between the 3 tiers of government, which has been made similar to that of VAT. The formula is as on your screen. Federal government 15%, state governments 50%, and local governments 35%. The next is tertiary education tax. The rate of tertiary education tax is now 3%. There you are. On your mark, set, go. September 1st is by the corner. For fuller details on the amendments as contained in the Finance Act 2023, watch Tax Matters episodes 25 and 26 on our YouTube channel.
I'm a very busy man. My business involves a lot of traveling, and I interface with lots and lots of people and organizations. Tax compliance used to be a big drag on my business. It was time-consuming and very costly. But now, no more. Introducing the FIRS Tax Pro Max, the truly fully end-to-end tax administration solution for companies' income tax, value-added tax, petroleum profits tax, and all other tax types. For fast, efficient, and convenient end-to-end tax experience, log on to www.taxpromax.firs.gov.ng. Tax Promax has turned things around for me. It is fast, user-friendly, and cost-effective. FIRS, making tax administration as easy as ABC.
Thank you for staying with us. Last episode, we brought you the story of the inauguration of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. The committee has since taken off. On that same episode, we brought you an excerpt from the interview conducted with Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, chairman of the committee. We want to continue sharing with you more from that highly stimulating interview. We still have with us Mr. Oyedele, Chairman, Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. Mr. Oyedele, welcome once again.
Thank you.
Now, your job today is to guide us to what is best for the future of our tax system. But as an observer of the country's tax system for about 2 decades now, can you tell us what you think we have gotten right, especially within the last 5 years, that can serve as good reference points for the future?
Yes, I'll say clearly, I'll say the national tax policy was a good thing we got right, because it's not many countries where you see a national tax policy, at least an indication of this is the direction in which we want to go. And I'll say to a very large extent, there was the willingness to implement it, and a good portion of it was implemented, although not entirely. So the National Tax Policy has been a good one. The Annual Finance Act was also a good one, even though what we think that we should do now, we think the Finance Act is like having a 1960 car, and then you remove the engine, put another one. The door is another brand, the tire, so you can't even say this car is Toyota or is Honda. So we're saying instead of patching this car, why don't you just buy a brand new one? That's what we want to do now. So if we do this well, I would say in the next 5 years, we won't need any Finance Act. But to be honest, the Finance Act helped us in the past. We just want to move to a higher level of how we address our issues in the system. And I think the other thing that has been good in the past 5 years will be the exemption threshold that was increased for personal income tax. It was increased, I think, from 3,000 a year to 30,000 per month for exemption. Then we also had been able to do the VAT threshold, which has really helped a lot of small, micro, nano businesses from the burden of tax. We've improved in terms of technology and also in terms of how we report the revenue we collect. So indeed, we have made some progress over the past few years. We're only just saying that still a lot more to do.
Without meaning to preempt your committee recommendation, in which or in what direction should we be moving against the background of what best practices?
We have made some progress, but the progress is not enough because there's still a lot for us to do, more than what we have done in the past. So, and the way I put it is the Nigerian tax system has developed, but it's still largely basic. So we need to now develop very quickly. And then in developing, there's a lot of using technology. And using technology is not just about introducing softwares and a different solution and all of that. We're going to be interrogating tax admin in Nigeria and more broadly revenue administration beyond just taxes to say, how did we design the system to work? How is it working? How do you collect the taxes? How do you report the taxes you collect? So how about the cost of collection? Is it efficient? Globally, there's a target of about 1% of revenue in cost of collection. Nigeria is doing far beyond that. You collect so little, yet your cost of collection is one of the highest in the world. We need to fix that problem. Yes, so I think the important thing there is, in terms of how we collect taxes, we have to do so efficiently. Because if you also look at the ease of paying taxes, we don't rank really well. So we want to make it easy for Nigerians to pay the tax that we think is right for them to pay based on data and evidence, and for government to be able to keep a lot of the money they collect from the people so that they are spending it back on the people rather than on paying the cost of collection. That's our hope and aspiration.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, also at the inauguration, the Special Advisor to Mr. President on Revenue Matters, Mr. Adedeji, said that your committee will not only advise the government on necessary reforms, but will also drive the implementation of such recommendations. Can you react to this?
You know that if you look back in time, and you can go back to since independence, you can decide to look back in the past 2 years, you'll find reports all over the place. We have reports on every single thing, whether it's technology, whether it's the civil service, whether it's tax. And all the reports, everybody would agree, brilliant reports. The problem is implementation. So this time around, what Mr. President has done differently is we don't want another committee writing another report. You guys should come and tell us what you think we should do. As you are telling us, once we approve, you go ahead and help us do it. And that is the reason why some of us are even excited about this opportunity to serve our country. So from day one, when we start the work, until the last day, we're both doing recommendation and implementation. So if you say to Mr. President that we need to, suspend VAT on diesel, and Mr. President say, nah, this makes sense. We just quickly write the executive order. The next day they sign it, we gazette it, we move on with our life and pick on the next thing that we need to do. So I think this is not only a good idea for this committee, I think it's a template we can replicate for other areas going forward so that we stop writing reports and start getting the job done.
Of course, that's what we all want. Now, if I heard you correctly, you mentioned that the national tax policy needs to be reviewed.
About every 5 years or thereabouts.
So that was why you mentioned the need to revamp the national tax policy in your speech.
Yes, actually, it's about revamping the entire tax system, of which the national tax policy is a component. So we are revamping everything, not just the policy alone.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. Now, please share with us the pedigree and background of your committee members.
Yes. Yeah, this one gets me excited. To be honest, Nigerians are really smart people, whether you're looking for qualification. In fact, there was a meeting I attended, African Tax Administrators Forum, and when we were discussing, someone said that they were doing an assessment of capacity of tax authorities in Africa. And there was no other tax authorities in the whole of Africa that has anything close to the number of PhD holders in FRS. And that's just FRS alone. So we should be proud of ourselves as a people. And it's not only academic qualifications, so experience, academic qualification, professional skills, we have it in abundance. So what we have done now is to carefully select Nigerians who are willing to serve and have the experience and the skills across the geopolitical zones. So the membership cuts across professional bodies, ICANN, CITN, ANAN, the Bar Association. You have the organized private sector, NASME, that's the Small and Medium Enterprises Association. You have Manufacturers Association, you have the Chambers of Commerce. Those guys are representing the organized private sector of Nigeria. You have the accounting, law, and tax practitioner firms are represented because they have the practical knowledge of dealing with these issues on a day-to-day basis. We have the academia, so we have some professors because they also bring a very unique perspective, especially in terms of research as well. Of course, we have the tax club students. They're not full members. They're more like supporting the secretariat. So they'll help us do research. They'll listen to what we're saying. They'll give their ideas. We're not taking them for granted that they could give us brilliant ideas that we'll take into account. Then we have government institutions, Ministry of Finance, Justice, Trade and Investment, Central Bank of Nigeria, of course, FRS. Joint Tax Board has a big representation because we needed the geopolitical zones. You have the NIPC, that's Investment Promotion Commission. You also have, Port Authority, NIMASA. So this is how the committee has been put together.
This is really good because it cut across all the different sectors.
Yes.
It's all for the common good of the nation.
Absolutely. Now, it's fairly large, I have to be honest. To be effective, what we've decided to do is to break it into subcommittees so that each committee is focusing on one dimension of the 3 pillars. And then we'll then have a steering committee so that you don't if you put 70, 60 people in a room trying to agree on a matter, it may be completely impossible to do. So this is the way we want to be able to do our work. We have extensive engagement plan with Nigerians, including Nigerians living with disabilities, Nigerians living abroad. They are a key stakeholder. Sometimes we forget them. We're going to be engaging with them as well. And then different sectors, from even farmers to traders, small business owners to multinationals, global CEOs. We even have a session for the ultra high net worth individual. I want to talk to the billionaires as well. Interestingly, we also have a session for tax officers. Sometimes you talk to everyone, you don't talk to the person collecting the tax. So that's in a nutshell, that is the composition of the team. We're very confident that we will not lack any skills that we need. If we lack them, or we just want to compare notes, we also have a plan to bring in international resource persons. If necessary, we may visit one or two places where they are doing it well already, particularly within the African continent, to learn from them. What Mr. President has done is he has given us that mandate and has broken it down into milestones. So we're supposed to have our first deliverable within the first 30 days. We call those ones quick wins. Then the first 6 months is critical reforms. And then 1 year is for implementation. So what that means is within the next 30 days, we'll try and identify the most pressing needs that we need to address that would impact on the people positively. And maybe they don't even require amending the law, which can sometimes take a long time. So maybe we just need an executive order or a regulation. Take, for example, I have been personal, and this is not the position of the committee, because the committee is not just me. I've been advocating for the suspension of VAT on diesel. Because we removed fuel subsidy on petrol, prices went up across the board. So if you remove or suspend the VAT on diesel, what you do is you give a bit of a cushion to rising price, because diesel actually goes into the cost of production a lot. Mr. President has talked about creating 1 million digital jobs for young Nigerians. We have provisions in the law that are going against that. Can we amend them? If it can be done in 30 days, how about 6 months? We have payments of levies and taxes that are due in dollars, foreign currency. So the question you're asking yourself is, why are you creating the heat in the foreign exchange market that is bringing down the value of the naira? Why don't you just pay your taxes in naira? So those interventions will come within 3 months. 6 months, we're going to be writing the laws. The major ones: company income tax, personal income tax, VAT. And then, like I said, we're going to have a review of the national tax policy. So these are some of the specific policy interventions that we want to undertake. It's a lot more than that. For example, we also think that we can do data for tax, where we collect intelligence within the ecosystem, not because we want to tax everyone, but because that gives us the opportunity to know who is poor. And when government wants to help people by paying them money, like conditional cash transfer, that's a credible data they can use. And they don't have to carry money in Ghana Must Go to be looking for people in villages. You credit their bank account if they have. If they don't, credit their phone. Almost all adults have phones, and they can use that phone like M-Pesa in Kenya. It could be food stamp to be able to collect food at subsidized amount or for free. Now, what all of this will do for us is to give us not only a very reliable data for tax purposes, but also for economic planning. And those are some of the specific interventions we're looking to be able to achieve.
Now, you've already spoken about the 30 days, the 6 months, and the 1 year. So does this cover your modus of operandi?
Yes, in a way. So the way we're going to operate is mostly around the subcommittee format that I explained earlier on, and then a steering committee. But we don't want to assume that we have the knowledge, even though we have a lot of competent people on the team, but they're just about 60. You can't compare that to 200 million Nigerians. Even if you take out the kids, you are still talking about 100 million plus Nigerian adults who have brilliant ideas to share. In just the past couple of weeks alone, I've received a lot of very brilliant ideas from Nigerians. So we want to be able to reach out and co-create a solution together with the Nigerian people. So that would be our mode of operation. We're going to be having regular interaction with the media, so it's good that we are speaking to Tax Matters now, because we think it's a way of, we're going to put our plans out there and then we do updates. We think it's a way of holding ourselves to account and ensuring that Nigerian people keep asking us about the progress that we are making. So ultimately, our modus operandi will rely on this kind of structure for effectiveness.
Thank you very much, sir.
It is an offense punishable by a fine of 10 million naira and or imprisonment for any agency of the federal government other than FIRS to demand for books or returns for the purposes of tax. It is also an offense to carry out the function of assessment, collection or enforcement of tax, or pay any portion of tax revenue to any person or into any account other than the relevant accounts designated by the Constitution or relevant laws of the National Assembly. It pays to pay your tax. This message is brought to you by the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS.
Sir, you mentioned Data for Tax initiative, and we know that you're a strong advocate of the Data for Tax initiative. Do you want to break this down for our viewers, and also what role would this play in tax administration?
Yes, I'm happy to speak about Data for Tax, to simplify it so that everybody is clear as to what the objectives are, to avoid misinterpretation or misconception about it. So essentially, Data for Tax is a concept that says, why don't you collect the intelligence about individuals and businesses to help you determine who should be in the tax net that you need to tax. It doesn't mean that when you collect intelligence, you tax everybody that you find. In fact, it helps you to determine who should be exempted if they are really poor. It helps to determine who is in the tax net but with one finger or two instead of the whole body. So the idea we have is, can we not use NIN, that's the National Identification Number, as a unique and primary identifier for individuals? Whereas for businesses and incorporated entities, we use CAC registration numbers. Once you do that, you tie those numbers to all economic activities. For an individual, getting a job, going to university, registering a vehicle, registering land, opening a bank account, getting a mobile phone, payment cards, importation of anything, buying PTA, every economic activities will be linked to that data. So that data, if you now call Taiwo Oyedele on the system, it will show you who Taiwo Oyedele is. You can tell whether this guy should be paying 1 million naira tax and he paid only 50,000. He needs to come and explain the difference. Maybe this guy has paid 200 naira tax and he should have been exempted because he's really poor and they're just harassing the poor person. So that is the concept around Data for Tax. It will help us to make sure that people pay the right amount of tax. It will help us to ensure that the burden of tax on the poorest people is taken off. It will ensure that the rich and the middle class pay their fair share. So that is the concept of the Data for Tax. And this is the reason why we are confident that we can increase tax revenue without introducing new taxes and without increasing the rate of existing taxes.
The concluding part of this interview with Mr. Oyedele will come to you in a subsequent episode of Tax Matters. We will also be filling you in with details of what transpired at the inauguration meeting and workshop of the committee. We are coasting home and we want to conclude with a public notice from the Federal Inland Revenue Service, and this is in regards to final call for invitation to attend a tax investigation exercise with the Special Tax Crimes Department of the service. The FIRS, in the exercise of its powers under the relevant statutes, hereby gives notice inviting the underlisted companies to immediately contact the service within 30 days of this notice and submit themselves to a tax investigation exercise in connection with their tax obligations under the relevant statutes. By this notice, the companies, their directors, or accredited representatives are to report to the Director, Special Tax Crimes Department at number 20 Shokode Crescent, Wuse Zone 5, Abuja. According to the notice signed by the Executive Chairman FIRS, the notice serves as a final invitation, as failure to comply will be treated as a contravention of the law, and the service will thereafter commence enforcement action on the companies without any further notice. We thank you for watching. See you next week.